In a quiet, forgotten corner of the Philippines, where the streets are lined with dust and dreams seem far away, a little girl named Lara lived with her family in a humble home made of bamboo and rusted tin sheets. Life was hard, but she always carried a strange kind of light in her eyes, a sparkle that made people notice her even when she said nothing. Her father worked long hours fixing old radios and appliances, while her mother sold vegetables in the market, doing everything she could to keep food on the table. Lara didn't have toys or gadgets like other kids, but she had imagination, and that imagination was about to change her life forever. One afternoon, while helping her mother at the market, she heard something she had never heard before. Across the street, a man in a cafe was playing the piano. The sound floated through the air like magic, soft at first, then powerful and deep. She froze, listening to every note as if her heart was learning a new language. When the man stopped, she couldn't help but clap. He smiled at her, and in that moment, something awakened inside her, a dream she couldn't explain. She wanted to play the piano more than anything in the world. But when she told her parents, they laughed gently, not because they didn't believe in her, but because they simply couldn't afford even a small keyboard. That night, Lara couldn't sleep. She kept hearing those piano notes in her head. The next day, she gathered pieces of cardboard and drew a piano keyboard with a black marker. Every night after her homework, she sat by the candlelight, pressing the drawn keys with her small fingers, imagining the sounds in her mind. Her father would sometimes stop his repair work and watch, wondering how someone so young could be so serious. She practiced like that for years, without sound, without a teacher, only guided by passion and memory. When neighbors teased her for playing nothing, she just smiled and kept going. She wasn't playing nothing, she was building something the world would one day hear. By the time she turned 13, her name had quietly spread around her little town. People called her the girl who plays the invisible piano. One day, a foreign tourist passing by saw her sitting at an old, broken piano that had been left in front of an abandoned building. Despite half the keys not working, she played a melody so emotional it stopped him in his tracks. He pulled out his phone, recorded her, and posted the video online. Neither of them knew that within a few days, that moment would change everything. The video exploded across social media. Millions of people shared it, astonished that a poor Filipino girl who had never owned a piano could play with such emotion and skill. The comments poured in from around the world. Some called her the Filipino Mozart, others simply said her music made them cry. Lara's tiny world suddenly felt enormous. Reporters came to interview her. Local schools offered her access to their music rooms. For the first time in her life, she sat before a real piano. Her hands trembled as she touched the smooth keys. When she pressed one, the sound that came out was pure magic. It was as if all those years of silent practice had been waiting for this moment. She practiced day and night, often sleeping beside the piano, afraid to let it out of her sight. One afternoon, as she played an original song she had written for her parents, a teacher filmed her again and uploaded the video. A few days later, an email arrived. It had the golden logo of America's Got Talent at the top. Her heart stopped as she read the words, "You are invited to audition in Los Angeles, California." Her mother screamed, her father wept, and the neighbors rushed in to celebrate. For a girl who had learned to play music without a piano, the world's biggest stage was suddenly waiting. And for Lara, it was just the beginning of a miracle. When Lara received the official invitation to audition for America's Got Talent, her family could hardly believe it was real. Her father read the email over and over, afraid it might disappear if he blinked. Her mother covered her face with her apron and cried with pride. The entire neighborhood gathered around their small home, cheering and hugging her as if she had already won. But behind all the excitement was a problem: they didn't have the money for the trip. Plane tickets, hotel costs, and food were far beyond what they could afford. Yet no one in her town wanted to let the little girl's dream die. The local school held a fundraiser, the market vendors placed donation jars on their stalls, and her father even sold his old motorbike, saying, "It's time the world sees what our daughter can do." Slowly, the community raised enough to send her to America. It was Lara's first time leaving her country, her first time even seeing an airplane up close. At the airport, she held her father's hand tightly, her heart racing with both fear and excitement. When she finally boarded the plane, she pressed her face to the window and whispered a quiet prayer. The flight felt endless, the clouds stretching like oceans of dreams. When she landed in Los Angeles, everything looked impossibly huge: the buildings, the lights, the cars. People moved fast, speaking English too quickly for her to follow, but she smiled anyway, clutching her small notebook filled with songs she had written by hand. The night before the audition, she stayed in a small hotel with her mother. Downstairs in the lobby, there was a grand piano. Lara sat there late into the night, playing softly while hotel guests stopped to listen. Some of them recorded her performance and asked her name. She just said, "I'm Lara, from the Philippines." An old woman approached her afterward and said, "You have a gift that touches hearts. Tomorrow, don't be afraid. Play the truth of who you are." Those words echoed in Lara's mind as she lay in bed that night, unable to sleep. She stared at the ceiling, thinking of her family back home, the streets she grew up on, and the cardboard piano keys that had started it all. When morning came, she put on a simple white dress her mother had sewn for her. They arrived at the AGT studio, surrounded by contestants from all over the world: dancers, singers, comedians, magicians. The air buzzed with energy and nerves. When her name was called, she walked slowly onto the massive stage, blinded by the lights and the sea of faces before her. The judges smiled, and Simon Cowell leaned forward with curiosity. "Hello," he said. "What's your name and where are you from?" Her voice trembled as she replied, "My name is Lara, I'm from the Philippines." The crowd clapped gently, encouraging her. Simon nodded. "And what will you be doing for us today?" She took a deep breath. "I will play the piano, a song I wrote for my parents." She sat down, her feet barely touching the pedals, and the room fell into total silence. The first notes were soft, almost like a whisper, but then the melody grew stronger, deeper, full of emotion that words could never express. Every note told a story, of hunger, hope, and the endless power of dreams. Simon leaned forward, his face serious, his eyes locked on her. Heidi placed her hand over her heart. As the song built to its final crescendo, the audience began to rise from their seats. When she finished, the theater exploded in applause. The judges stood, the crowd chanting her name. Simon was the last to speak. He paused for a long moment before saying, "Lara, that was one of the most beautiful performances we've ever had on this show. You didn't just play the piano, you made it sing." Then, without warning, he reached out and slammed the golden buzzer. Gold confetti rained from above as Lara covered her face, crying in disbelief. Her mother ran on stage, hugging her as the audience cheered louder and louder. In that moment, the little girl who once played on cardboard keys had done the impossible: she had moved the world with her music. After that unforgettable golden buzzer moment, Lara's life transformed overnight. News stations around the world replayed her performance, calling her the miracle pianist. Clips of Simon Cowell smiling in disbelief spread across the internet like wildfire. Lara, the poor Filipino girl who once practiced on cardboard keys, was now a global sensation. Her social media exploded with millions of followers, and people from every corner of the world sent her messages of love and support. Yet, through all the attention, she stayed humble. Each night, she video called her parents from her small apartment in Los Angeles, telling them about rehearsals, interviews, and how much she missed home-cooked meals. Her father always said, "No matter how far you go, play from the heart." That's what people will remember. As the semi-finals approached, the pressure grew. She knew she wasn't just performing for herself now, she was carrying the dreams of every child who had ever been told their dreams were too big. For days, she barely slept, working with her coach to perfect her new piece, a song she titled, "Echoes of Home." The piece was emotional and haunting, blending soft Filipino folk melodies with classical piano tones. The night of the semi-finals, as she waited backstage, her heart pounded. When the stage manager called her name, she whispered a prayer and walked out into the light once again. The audience was silent as she began to play. The melody painted pictures, of a little girl sitting in a candle-lit room drawing piano keys on cardboard, of her mother selling vegetables, of her father fixing radios late into the night. Every note carried a story, and every pause held the weight of her journey. Simon closed his eyes while she played, completely lost in the music. By the time she reached the final note, the entire hall was standing Some people were crying, and even the judges couldn't speak for a few moments. Finally, Simon said softly, "You remind us why we do this show. You are proof that real talent doesn't come from money or privilege, it comes from the soul." The crowd erupted again, and Lara bowed deeply, tears streaming down her face. That night, her performance went viral again, hitting tens of millions of views within hours. As the finale approached, Lara knew it was the biggest night of her life. She had made it all the way to the end, something she never dared to dream. But winning wasn't what mattered to her anymore. She wanted to leave something unforgettable behind. For her final performance, she composed an original symphony called Rise, a musical story of hope, courage, and faith. The piece combined everything she had learned, the classical techniques she had mastered, the traditional Filipino rhythms she grew up with, and the emotions that defined her journey. When she walked onto the stage for the last time, she looked around and took a deep breath. The lights dimmed, the audience hushed, and then she began to play. The music rose and fell like waves, powerful, delicate, and full of heart. The audience leaned forward, completely mesmerized. As she hit the final chord, she stood and looked out at the crowd, her chest rising and falling with emotion. Then, an incredible thing happened. The entire theater stood in silence for a moment, before erupting into thunderous applause. Simon was wiping his eyes. Heidi was crying openly. Howie said, "You've made history tonight." Although Lara didn't win first place, she won something far greater, the world's love. After the show, she received countless offers, record deals, invitations to perform across Europe and Asia, and scholarship opportunities from top music schools. But her first decision was different. She flew back home to the Philippines. When she arrived, the whole town came out to welcome her, children carrying flowers, banners saying, "Welcome home Lara," and music echoing through the streets. Standing before them, she announced her dream to open a small music school for poor children, a place where no one would ever have to draw piano keys on cardboard again. In the final scene, Lara sits at a piano in her new school, surrounded by children laughing and learning. She smiles and says softly, "Dreams don't need money, they just need belief." The camera pans out, showing the little bamboo house where it all began, and the faint sound of her piano fills the air once more, a song that the world will never forget.